Welcome to another episode of the 40% Better podcast. As always, this is Bill. And with me, I have Darshan, who is going to share all the experiences, or at least some of the experiences, that he's had leading software teams. Welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me. This is a new experience.
Yeah, of course. Good. Got to have new experiences. So the starting question that I always ask, and this is really the only scripted question, I swear, is how did you get started leading anything? Whether it was, the first software team or, you were rounding up people to play soccer when you were 7 years old or whatever it happens to be. Like, how did you get started?
I don't really have a story that I can take you back to my childhood, for example. So like that's not the story here. I'm a very introverted person. So like I guess like leadership didn't come super naturally to me, right? Like I consider myself like a builder at heart, and I've been writing code since I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. Like building stuff is like something that I was really like really interested in. And so I remember I started programming when I was 10, did a bunch of basic coding, started with 82, 86. Really liked creating things. Like I really liked bringing kind of imagination to life. And that's how I got my kind of tech journey started. I grew up in India, in the city called Bangalore, which like some folks might know as like the Silicon Valley of India. And so I went to school there, and like the natural thing for me to do seemed to be to go into computer science. So I went to college, studied computer science and engineering, and then I joined some service companies, and I started with this place called Huawei, which is a Chinese company that had an office in Bangalore at that point of time. And so from there I went to Yahoo, and I was an engineer at Yahoo for a bit, and then I was at Microsoft for a bit. Never at any point of time did I want to be a manager. In fact, like in the first 10 to 12 years of my career, I was strongly against it. Like I thought that would probably be like the worst possible career move for me, just given kind of naturally, like the fact that I really, really like building things. What prompted the move was at Yahoo, I had this manager that said, like, hey, I'm going to put you in charge of a project. This was been about 12 years into my career. And I just need you to go get it done for me, with minimal supervision. I'm going to have like 2 people work with you. Go see if you can figure it out. And then we got that project done, and got that project done on time with quality. And it turned out that I was actually pretty good at this mentorship thing. And the feedback that I got from these folks that I was kind of like, I wasn't officially managing them, but the feedback that I got was like, hey, we like working with you. And this experience was fun. And so at that point of time, Yahoo was going through a bunch of turmoil. And the place was shutting down. So I had to find a new job. Like it was basically shutting down in India. And Amazon was growing big. And Amazon reached out, and at that point of time, I had an option to either interview for an engineer or interview for a manager role. And I thought, like, I should give this manager thing a shot, right? Like, what's the harm? And so I interviewed. I didn't get into Amazon at the level that I was interviewing for, which was like L6, which is supposed to be a seasoned manager. But given that I had literally like probably like 4 months of management experience, if you can call it that, I got in at an L5, which is like an entry level manager. And then like just grew from there, I guess, right? Like I just figured that like, hey, this is something that I truly enjoy. I like helping people build their careers. And I guess like over time I got better and better at it. And like just like kind of ended up where I am today. Haven't really planned out my career as such.
Yeah, I don't know that many people really planned very far on their career. Like, yeah, I guess some people do. I have not. It's been a lot. I haven't planned in the long term. It's been more, what's the next 2, 3, 5 years look like?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree. For me, it's I don't know, I've never been too much of a planner, which like honestly, if you look at my engineering manager toolkit as well, like if you look at the people management, the technical and program and project management aspects of it, project management has never been a strong suit because honestly, like I've never been a planner. It is something that doesn't come naturally to me. So like when you think about your tool set as an engineering manager and like as you grow, right? It's like one of those things that I have to be like really conscious about, right? Like because there've been so many screw ups in the past that you kind of realize that like, hey, this is, if I don't focus on this, it's kind of going to become my Achilles heel. And, I really had to focus on it. So
Right.
I guess like one of the things I've become good at is like identifying when things can go wrong and identifying risk. But it's come through a lot of
Mm-hmm.
pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that, pain's a teacher, that's, we get stuff wrong, things break, and we're like, oh wait, I got to not do that next time. Yeah. And so, yeah, so we try to avoid the damages. Yeah. When you were at Amazon, were you running software teams?
I was, yeah. Amazon was super interesting. I was there for almost 11 years. Though in the middle I left and I actually went back, which is another story by itself. So I started out with a team of, I think, 6 or 7 engineers. I basically, for the first 5 years of my career at Amazon, I was on the retail side of the business. So my teams basically built software for the Amazon automotive store. And then we did that for about 1.5 years. That was when I was recruited into Amazon India. And then I found this really interesting opportunity in Seattle, which is where I'm based out of today. And my manager, the manager that I had in Seattle, actually recruited me, and he and I are still friends. Like we hike together quite often. So he recruited me to the Seattle Amazon office to build this team building voice, vision, and wearables tech. So it was like this next generation of tech that they were going after. It was like a small incubator team in the larger mobile shopping organization at Amazon, right? So I remember like my teams built a shopping app for Google Glass, which didn't launch. We built an app for the Apple Watch where you could actually look for products and like scroll through products and do a one-click purchase of the watch. Like no one used it, obviously, but it was a lot of fun building it.
Yeah, right.
And then we built shopping apps, voice shopping experiences within the Amazon app, right? Like so, it was like this really fun team where like the idea was like go and build a bunch of experimental stuff and see what sticks. So I really made some lifelong friends within that team. That like my manager, like he's become a really good friend, and like I still am in touch with a bunch of people from that team. Like we're just going to do a Diwali party with one of my colleagues this weekend. So those friendships really stuck. I felt. And then after that, I kind of moved into the advertising space, where I spent about 5 years of my career. And like when I joined Amazon, I was managing like a 5-6 person team. By the time I left, it was close to 100-person organization. So I kind of grew, had 2 or 3 promotions and just managed larger and larger complexity. So mostly engineering teams, but in the last couple of years that I was at Amazon, I was what Amazon calls single-threaded owner. So the idea being that you're basically responsible for a part of a business. So that means my charter kind of expanded to managing product managers, technical program managers, applied scientists, engineers, and then basically being responsible for part of the P&L of the business, right? Like so, Amazon. The great thing about Amazon, I feel, is that it gives you that opportunity fairly early on in your career, whereas like in other companies, you tend to have like more functional ownership. There's pros and cons, I guess, but that's kind of my Amazon story.
Awesome. It's very cool. And being able to build stuff just purely that, speculatively, that's a huge win. That's, yeah, because, yeah, you get to experiment and be like, hey, maybe this will work. Maybe someone, I'm, who's going to, I don't know that I would go, like, for me, using the app on my phone to buy stuff is really as small a screen as I really want to look at. unless I know, oh, I'm ordering another something like vitamins, where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just reordering the same one from before. I could maybe do that on my watch, but even that,
Yeah, no,
the form
yeah.
factor is,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, Amazon can afford to do things like that, which is why it was fun, right? It's like we learned a
right.
bunch of stuff, and like honestly, like it was a fun moment every time we saw those dashboards and saw like even one order coming through, whereas like on the Amazon website we had like 10,000 orders or whatever per second. So it was fun, right? But I think what I'll say is that like my team was the first to build like kind of voice shopping experiences at Amazon. Like this was pre Alexa days, by the way, before Alexa came out, right?
Oh wow,
Yeah, so you
yeah.
could go into an Amazon app. I don't even know if it still exists, where you click on the mic button and then like say, "Hey, reorder toilet paper or whatever," right? And it would work. So we had a bunch of learnings that I think that other teams within Amazon kind of leveraged our experience to figure out like, okay, how does shopping and voice work together? So there's
Right.
more like that, but I think like the incubation was a really fun and cool experience, but I guess one of the things that my career has also taught me is like typically follow the money. That's really important. Which is why I went to
Mm.
ads.
So follow the money from the perspective of revenue at the business or higher salary, or like, give me some more
Oh yeah,
detail on
yeah.
that.
Revenue for the business. I mean, like I've personally never gone after like high comp myself, though I've done well for myself. Um, yeah, follow the money in the sense that like go and work for a part of the business that's growing, right? Which is like it's
Mm.
the whole like find the place within Amazon that's growing like a rocket ship and like go become a part of that, and like don't worry too much about your role or like specific things that you'll work on. Like don't be too attached to domain or technology or like a specific project that you want to do or team size or things like that. um, um, Find a place in the company where that is experiencing growth and go there, because that's how you kind of experience personal growth. It's not a very well thought out strategy or anything like that, but it's like one of those pieces of advice that my mentors have given me that has really stuck with me, right? And ads is a really really big business for Amazon, and as I said, like when I joined the team, it was 20 people, and by the time I left, it was like my team was close to like 100 plus people. So clearly, right? Like, I mean, I think I did a reasonable job, but also like I was super lucky that I ended up in the place.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I love that idea of going for the place that's got the growth. Because it sounds like there's lots of learning opportunities there. There's a lot of things that you got to learn in that space that if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have gotten to learn. And so you get to advance your career because you've got this knowledge. Um, People have asked me about whether they should join startups or not. And I'm always like, yeah, join the startup. Like, even if the startup fails, there's so much knowledge because you have to wear 75 hats. And and so and for me, the the real win is all the stuff I get to learn. Um and and I the flip side to that is I get that for some people that that's not their comfort zone, and they want a lot more stability, and they they're they're not as comfortable in that
Yeah,
environment.
yeah,
um
I totally hear
yeah.
you. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I really love working where I am right now. I work at this company called Squire. It's a Series D startup, and basically what we do is we build end-to-end solutions for barbershops. And barbershops are actually like a pretty big market in the US. Like by any rough estimate, there's 100,000 shops in the US, and of course, like we are in the US and like a few other countries as well. But for me, what really prompted the move into a startup is at a bunch of these big companies. I was at Amazon for the longest time, and then I went to Stripe for a bit. I felt like I'd become really adept at navigating large organizations, and skill
Hmm.
set that I had built was kind of the skill set that like I'd gotten really good at convincing people to kind of rally around like a goal, and do things that are important to the company. But I'd say like almost 50% of my bandwidth was spent on building kind of political capital, right? And that is not inherently to say that like Amazon and Stripe are political companies. There are pockets here and there. I guess like it's culture varies, but I really enjoyed my time at both the companies. But I kind of really wanted to go work for a place that's kind of unfettered, uh, where I don't have to spend a bunch of mind space thinking about how I get something built. I would rather spend a bunch of mind space thinking what I need to build, right, and like how it's going to serve the customer. Right? And at Squire, I get to spend almost 90% of my time thinking of that, right? Like which has been such a fun experience. I've had to do a lot of unlearning from my like big company experience, but I'm settling in nicely.
That's awesome. And you know, the part of what you're talking about there is this the context switch, right? And the benefit, the value of it, which is awesome. And we put in plenty of time at Amazon to really understand that environment and be comfortable in the space and to know how to grow a part of the company is super valuable. You mentioned that you left for a while. What was, and that there's a story behind
Oh
that?
yeah. Um, so I at that point of time I had spent about 7 or 8 years at Amazon, um, and I was going after a promotion, and I had worked really hard on the promotion. This was a promotion to senior manager, um, and I was working like 12, 14-hour days at that point of time. I had been working like that for almost a couple of years, and I was working in the ad space, obviously. Um, and at that point of time, I there was this company that had opened up in Seattle called LivePerson. A bunch of Amazon execs had gone there, and someone I knew kind of reached out, um, talked to me about the potential opportunity there, and I went and interviewed. Um, it was an interesting space. It was an interesting spot. It built kind of conversational commerce experience. This was prior to LLMs, so it was a bunch of manually curated conversations, and then you could go and design a bunch of conversations. But um, um, LLMs were just coming out at that point of time. COVID kind of hit. Um, wasn't a super fun experience for me, to be honest. Um, like I just didn't feel like I like the culture worked for me, and like no disrespect to
Mm.
the company, right? It just felt like I had too much of Amazon ingrained in me at that point of time, and in a year or so at the company, I kind of realized that hey, this is not working for me, and I'm not really participating and contributing to the success of this company like I should. Um, and at that point of time, it was just serendipity, I guess, like someone that I worked with from Amazon reached out to me saying, I have this really great opportunity. Would you consider coming back? And I wasn't looking or anything like that at that point of time. And I interviewed and I got the role. And then I kind of went back to Amazon. I went back to Amazon ads. Basically, like my manager that used to manage me before I left Amazon, I went back to working for her because I felt like we had a really good working relationship. And so I went and did
Hmm. Hmm.
5 more years at Amazon.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Culture is a huge thing. And uh, it's, I feel like the companies I've been at that had the very best culture, and there's two that I've worked at that really stand out. Um, both of them had, they both had the senior leadership perspective that individual contributors were the ones that made the world go around, and that the executive's job was to make sure that individual contributors had whatever they needed, via the org chart, right? And yeah, and um, they were consistently and repeatedly vocal about it. So it wasn't a mystery, right? They said out loud, like the one of the companies, um, the founder said to me, because I was running a software team, he said, your job is to make your team as high performing as possible. And by the way, happy. They've got to be happy first and high performing second. And my job is to make sure that you have whatever you need to make that happen. So whatever you want, come and ask me for it. Like, I don't care what it is, just come and talk to me. We'll figure out a way to make it work. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And, so I did, I was like, that was great. And the other one was a restaurant I worked at in college that had an amazing internal coaching culture, where it didn't matter where you were in the org. If you had a better idea, you could pitch the idea. People would yay, nay, whatever. We'd talk about it for a little bit, and then we would go experiment for 2 weeks. And nobody cared where the idea came from, which was awesome. And oftentimes the ideas came from people at the lower end of the totem pole, because they would see the friction more clearly, and they'd be like, hey, this is slowing us down, whatever. And so we would experiment, and the GM was like, cool, because he didn't know that where we were seeing friction, right? So those were really good.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Like even if I think back to my journey, like when I went to Amazon and left Amazon to go to a smaller company, which it was kind of operated like startup, but it was a public company. It had been public for 20 years. I think honestly, it was more me than anything else. Like I was not ready for that role. I went there and tried to, like, basically my approach was like, hey, I know what works at Amazon. I'm going to bring a bunch of that process to this company. And like, hey, Amazon has this way in which we hire, like, we're amazing at it. And so I went and introduced like a bar raiser program at the company. I introduced like a bunch of heavy operational process and design process. I looked at the product and suggested like, hey, this thing doesn't work well. There's a bunch of manual steps. We should kind of rewrite this. So I just tried to bring in a bunch of change too quickly. And what I realized was that, like, I should have kind of picked my battles at that point of time and realized that not everything that works at Amazon is going to work elsewhere. Plus also the fact that,
right.
People are generally will tell you that they are happy to change, but there's generally a lot of resistance to change, right? And so, like, I guess like the emotional quotient that I needed as a leader was still missing a little bit at that point of time, especially given that like I'd kind of become indoctrinated into the Amazon culture, right? And I felt like, hey, there's this one way of operating that should ideally translate to every other place that I worked at. And like, honestly, it was a little bit of a rude awakening for me from the perspective that like, hey, like a lot of this stuff doesn't work. And I think I need to spend some more time introspecting and listening, right? Like, so I think that, and then spending some more time at Amazon, I think I'm doing a better job of it now at the current startup than I am.
Oh, good. Yeah. Most of my career has been at startups or smaller companies, and it seems like the companies that did the best gave the executives were willing to give the team leads a lot of autonomy, and which, pro con, right? A lot of autonomy, which means you're responsible now for this part of the business, right? The same thing you're talking about, right? At a when you're at a smaller company, it's a lot easier to become responsible for a big chunk of the P&L, just because it's way smaller, and you can get there, right, really fast, and so you see it, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, here's all these pieces, and I think it's just a question of, are you ready for that, to play that game? Are you ready to be thinking, oh, well, this is 25% or 30% of our revenue, or all the revenue, for some tech startups, right? Like everything exists based on our technology. Okay, I got to like really make sure I understand what we're building and why we're building it, and um, how to have the customers all be really, really happy. And yeah, and
Yeah, that's interesting to me, right? Like to me, um, like I never had to work in an environment where it was we have to get this done, otherwise literally like the future of the company is at stake. Like you don't think in those terms, like working at
sure,
big companies. Um,
right, right,
and like working in a startup, like the prioritization and what you work on, like just being ruthless about prioritization and making sure that what you're building is extremely high value. Like I've had to put way more
yep,
thought into that than I put at Amazon or even at Stripe, right? Because you can deal with some level of waste, I guess, in the bigger companies. You just like that's just not a luxury at a smaller company. I
right.
mean, you have much
Oh
more
yeah, yeah.
experience at startups than I do, but I'm still learning.
Yeah, it's a it's definitely a ruthless prioritization. It's a really good way to put it. um and like I spent a lot of time talking with the sales team and with customers and sitting in on sales calls, just to hear what the end users were saying, as to get that as much as I could, um, because the the game of telephone, just I didn't um, I didn't trust that knowledge would come through through the game of through the executive channels and whatever else, right? And so the same as it would if I just talked to the end user. And I know that some people get really worried about having a statistically significant number of end users to talk with, and I very quickly realized that that's doesn't matter. I'm like, okay, five is way better than zero, because there's stuff that I'll learn that I can't imagine, right? I am not the end user, and five people will give me data, and I'll be like, oh, holy cow, that's a light bulb
Yeah,
moment.
yeah. This reminds me of this
And
thing that Bezos said about data and anecdotes disagreeing with each other, right? Like he said, if the data and anecdotes disagree with each other, like it's usually the anecdotes that are right. Um, that's a great.
yes, oh my God, that's a genius
Yeah,
quote,
yeah,
right? Um, and I think that's one of the things that really helped us, and partly it's um, the same founder that said his job was to make me successful and getting my team to be high performing. He encouraged me to talk with people. He's like, look, whatever I tell you is through my filter. You need to talk with people also, because you're going to hear different things that I'm not thinking of asking. And so you need to have your own set of curiosity, explorations. And so, start off with talking to the guy that was running sales, and then talking to a sales team, and then sitting in on their calls. And then once you start sitting in on calls with prospects or with clients, all of a sudden they're calling you directly, and they're like, hey, we'd really like you to put this feature in, and I'm like, oh, okay, talk to me about it. Like, what's the business problem that we're trying to solve here? Um, and okay, let me see if I can get some other people that like it's. I never want to build a feature for just one customer. Like that seems like the worst idea in the world for me. Um, but be like, okay, let me talk to some other people and see if everybody else likes the idea. And it almost always there was 5 other people, 10 other people would be like, oh my God, yes, we want that. And I'd be like, okay, cool, it's in the roadmap now, the way we go.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, which is also one of the things about a startup. Like at Amazon, the the planning process and everything was just so heavy, which totally made sense, right? Like the impact of something that you do when it impacts like hundreds of millions of customers, you have to be so careful about what you put out there. And planning process took like almost like 6 months. It used to start in June and like it used to run through the end of the year. It was draining, honestly.
Wow.
And then like by the end of Q1 or Q2, you discover that like, hey, we have to do something completely different, right? Like, so, I mean, there's a bunch of things about Amazon that honestly like are great, and a bunch of things that I didn't enjoy. But like at a startup, you just have to be so much more nimble, right? Like at Square, for example, we just do our
Right.
roadmap every quarter, right? And we just come together as a team for a day, talk about what we need to do, where we are, what makes sense to do for the next quarter, and make some quick decisions and move on. Um, at Amazon, it was just not that easy, I think, and just the
Right.
world is
Yeah.
changing so much. Like Amazon has a document writing culture. At one point of time, I was at Amazon and I realized that like we had to present a document to an SVP, and we literally had like 8 meetings prepping for that meeting.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
and it was really important meeting. It was really important that the document is high quality, right? But it just brings me back to that point of like, hey, I really need to go and like diversify my set of experiences, right? Like because like I'm becoming an expert at navigating and scaling large organizations, um, and I'm forgetting my builder roots as such, right? And I think like with AI,
Mm.
I feel like it's just been so quick for me to get back to my builder roots, that it's been incredible, right? Like I feel like those days of like large org builders that manage like teams of hundreds of people, like I feel like those kind of positions will be more replaced by people who manage small and nimble teams but get a bunch of stuff done. So for me, it's like been an incredible transition, right? Like I'm really personally leaning into the AI revolution myself and like trying to do it for my company in an organized and thoughtful way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And part of what you can bring to the table is because you have all this process from big organizations, you've got a library of possibilities. You don't have to use them, but you can say, oh wait, will this whatever it is work in this context? Will the document heavy process that Amazon likes, will that work for you guys, or is that actually a, a failure pattern, an anti pattern, right? And we got to avoid that because nobody has time for 8 meetings before they're going to
Yeah.
do that. Like it's just yeah,
Yeah, and at this point of
that's
time, I
a
mean,
time suck.
I can just fire up a tool like Cursor or something, which is just so great at understanding code, right? Is that the like the need for documentation has shifted, right? Like what I encourage my teams to do is like, hey, not every feature needs a design document, for example. Like not every feature, like you can put a bunch of context literally like into the PR itself, right? Like when you're putting out a PR, like instead of putting out a design document, just put out a prototype. Just show the thing actually working. Like
Right.
if you're building a UI feature, like don't spend a bunch of time writing a PR FAQ. Like just go wipe code a prototype and show the prototype actually working, and like show how you're solving the
Right.
customer
Right.
problem, right? And
Yeah.
I really feel like I hopefully like some of the bigger companies will also lean more into this. Which is like just you don't need to do a bunch of upfront work thinking about it, because at least the prototyping stage is like way cheaper now than it used to be in the past, right? Like so I feel like there's a different way of doing things now, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
continue
Yeah.
to evolve.
Yeah. 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 And to that point, every time I've built a prototype and then shown it to whoever, any stakeholder, right? They don't have to have much imagination to figure out what's going on. They're like, oh, I totally get it. Yes, we need this, you know? And so getting stakeholder buy-in, which is to me is a very critical part of the whole process, is so much easier when you got a prototype. You know,
100%. Like one of the things that my company
yeah,
was thinking of building was um, this phone agent, basically, right? Like, so one of barbershop pain points is that a lot of time they're in the middle of a haircut, and then someone's calling them to book an appointment, and they can't take the calls and end up losing money that way. And so one of the things was like, hey, can we just automate this? Like, can we have an agent that answers calls for us? And company had been thinking about it for a couple of years, and we had this complex like IVR system that we built at some point of time, like press one for this, two for this, like that never worked. And the cool thing is that we are actually able to build up a phone agent that talks to you in natural language, books and cancels appointments, tells you about services. We were actually able to build it up in a week. Um, um, yeah,
wow,
and that's literally how fast it took. It took a week, and we were able to get it out into alpha and then actually announce it to the world in a month. So it's just like I feel like the world is
that's
changing
amazing.
around us. Yeah,
Yeah, wow, that's fast. That is very
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So I mean, like that's the thing, right? Like I mean, I don't think AI is taking my job, but the person who knows how to use AI well is probably the person that will take my job, right? Like it's just a different skill set. I think that's needed now.
Right, right. So this is interesting in part because I keep seeing articles about how um, these AI projects are failing, and I wonder if it's because people are trying to swallow the ocean in one shot, with AI, and they're like, oh, sorry, doesn't work. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, my I guess like my thoughts are evolving a little bit, right? At the end of the day, though, like what I'll say is like what I learned at Amazon will is really serving me well, which is like always start with the customer problem and work backwards. Uh, and
Hmm.
like don't start with a solution in the hope that you find the right problem for it. Having said that, right, like some of the things, for example, right, like not everything needs a chat interface. Um, so there's just like still things to be said for really clean, usable UX that doesn't need to be replaced by a chat, by like a chat interface, for example, right? So
Right,
I think
right.
like some parts of this, honestly, like I feel like people are getting wrong by putting a bunch of chat interfaces on things that don't need to exist. Um, Personally, for me, I feel like where AI has really helped is two places. Like one is really thinking hard about the kind of problems that you solve for customers. So it's like a phone agent, I feel like it has worked really well. The other place I feel like it has worked really, really well for us is accelerating developer productivity. I think it's working incredibly well there. And just in
Okay.
terms of raw numbers, right? I'll be a little bit vague here, but measured from Q1 to Q3 this year, we've seen over a 50% improvement in literally developer output and productivity, same headcount. And so those numbers are
Wow.
amazing. And I mean, like one instance I'll tell you, like which is we had an incident recently that a customer reported to us. Every time an incident happens, it gets reported into a Slack channel, and we were literally talking about it. And someone just put a cursor bot into the Slack channel and said, "Hey, cursor, analyze this conversation and go figure out if you can figure out like what's going on." Cursor was able to take the conversation from the Slack context. It was able to look at our code base. It was able to find the issue, and it posted literally the PR in the Slack channel, which a human looked at, reviewed, and we had the incident fixed in a day. So, I mean, to me, that was like mind-boggling,
Wow.
honestly. And so, like, that's an
Yeah.
area I think the DevOps is an area that I think it, I think AI is truly, truly going to help, right? Like, which is, I think helping us accelerate even further. Um, Having said that, like the last thing I'll say on this is that, like, I think if you think that you can take the human out of the loop completely in this, like, I think you're mistaken. Like, you have to have a human looking at the
Right.
code. You have to have a human, like humans and engineers around you that understand this code, right? You may be doing a bunch of prompt engineering, but if you don't understand the code that's coming out of it, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's so, it's interesting. I'm always happy when I hear success stories like this. And also, a piece of it is you're figuring out where the tool works really, really well. And you're not just saying, well, everything in the world is a nail and I have a hammer. Like you really, oh, this is the place, and right here is the place to use this versus doing it everywhere. And it feels like a lot of people are trying to just apply one thing. They're like, we're going to use this for everything, and
Yeah.
it's just not.
Yeah,
It's not
100%.
working. I got to.
100%. Like one of the things, right? Like which is like one of the things that came with a bunch of increased velocity was just a bunch more incidents, right? And so one thing I realized, for example, is like, hey, our quality processes haven't really scaled with our increased productivity. So we had to go back and redo our quality process. Like really think about, okay, how do our quality processes now adjust to this new and improved velocity, right? Like what do we need to do now that we weren't doing in the past,
Right.
right? And so again, like we're leaning into AI there as well. We signed with this YC company called Momentic that's helping us with automated testing, but also we've introduced like more redundancy into the system in terms of humans actually taking a look at it, right? So like if an
Okay.
engineer is
Yeah.
looking at a PR and someone is doing a code review of that, we're not just going to rely on an automation to test that it works. We're actually going to ask the code reviewer to just do a quick sanity test to make sure everything works, right? Like, so it introduces
Mm-hmm.
some redundancy to the process, but just relying blindly on AI to do everything for you without like humans in the loop, I think is very dangerous and it has bitten us, right?
Right.
So with the increased productivity, I'm like thinking a little bit harder about where it makes sense to introduce a human in the loop in the process, because I feel like that's really valuable and like where those humans and engineers are inserted in the loop, I feel like those are really valuable skills to pick up, and those are the kinds of engineers that are going to be like I think super successful in the coming years.
Right. Oh, that totally makes sense. Um, does You mentioned your engineering velocity has improved by, I think you said 50%, which is phenomenally good. Um, like does your sales team come over and like bring you cookies and like like whatever it is to your team, like sending out chocolates to them to motivate them, because it seems like if you're years ago, one of the companies that I worked at, the uh, the the guy that ran sales made a comment to me one time that um, stuck in my head. He said, "I can't sell faster than your teams are writing code." Right? And I was like, "Oh, I get that." And he's like, because customers aren't going to buy the product that we're going to have 2 years from now, today, right? They want, like, they're buying the thing that's here. It's and so I always had this really high level of, after that conversation, this high level of sensitivity to velocity, engineering velocity tied to revenue velocity. Um, and if you get, like, you guys should be, the salespeople should be coming over to your house and bringing you dinner on a regular
Well,
basis,
that's not
you know?
happened yet, I guess. But so here's the thing, right? Like previously, like we had like maybe 20 different things to do, and maybe time to do 5 of them. Now it's just become we have 100 different things to do, and maybe we're getting like maybe 10 or 12 done. Like the quality processes have slowed us down a little bit, so that's kind of tempered. I tempered that. And then the other thing I'll say is also
Mm-hmm.
we've used the fact that AI really helps to do some fairly large rewrites to the system, right? Like, so that's not producing immediate customer value, but um,
Mm.
like one of the things that we're doing, for example, is like we're redoing some of our quite a bit of our code from native apps into React Native, and AI is really really helping there, right? Like with a combination of like Figma Make and then connecting up Cursor to a Figma MCP. Like we just find that like as long as like we're spending a bunch of time on the design language and spending a bunch of time on writing up like rules for the LLMs, they do a really good job of generating our code for us. So a lot of productivity improvement and gains that we're seeing is from new code that we're writing. That is, I guess, unburdened by the legacy, right? Which is why that number I think is a little bit skewed, right? Like I think AI does way better at new code than at operating within legacy code. So like I
Oh,
guess like
interesting.
if you were to talk to me in another 6 months when the project is done and now we're adding a bunch of features, I suspect that number will come down.
Okay. Okay. That's still, that's a very interesting, stack of observations that you're having in there in this context. That's very cool. Yeah. So people need to get better at working with AI in their coding and using it, and yeah, I've bumped into a guy that I've known for years at the gym, and I asked him if or how he was using AI, and just random conversation, and because he's a sales engineer, and he said, "Oh, whenever I have a question about what the code does, I can't remember which AI he was using. He goes, I just copy the code block, paste it into the prompt, and say, explain this to me like I'm a kindergartner." So then and he's like, it just has made my life so much easier, to really figure out like what stuff is doing, if there's a problem, customers aren't getting
Oh
what they
yeah,
want,
totally,
whatever.
right? Like
Yeah.
I have a good story here, like a success story, right? Which is a lot of the times, like when our product has been around for almost 10 years at this point, right? Like so it's grown and evolved and just become more and more complex over time. And like the GTM teams, for example, have a bunch of questions on like, hey, does the product do this versus does the product do that? Like product managers also, like if you have new product managers, like there's a bunch of like I guess legacy knowledge like that's kind of encoded in the code,
Mm-hmm.
and so one of the things I've been very particular about is like this knowledge like should be shared, right? Like across the team, right? And previously, like if you had a question like that, you'd always reach out to an engineer who had been here for a long time, who knew where all the skeletons were, like all the bodies were buried. Um, but now I think what I've been able to do is like I've been able to give all of my product managers and like a bunch of folks in sales and GTM like access to Cursor, and they can just ask Cursor the question, and like I'm saying like
Nice.
90% plus percent of the time Cursor gets it right. Like so, if you have a question about how the product works, you don't need to talk to engineering anymore. You can just go ask a bot a question, and like it does a great job of answering that question for you.
Oh, that's such a good use. And this is just internal,
It's
right?
all in one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Um, that 10% error rate outside might be a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Maybe.
we're not going
Yeah.
to expose this externally, right? Just we're to be really
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah.
So, but it's all internal. Like I mean, like I feel like even with my onboarding, um, I was probably able to accelerate it 50% because like I don't have to reach out to an engineer anymore saying, hey, I'm trying to understand this piece of code or I'm trying to understand this architecture. I can just have a conversation with Cursor, which is a AI coding agent, like I'm talking to a senior engineer, right? And like it it works great.
That's awesome. I like that. Good advice for people to figure this to like where to go focus attention, right? Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. I really like it. How do you make sure that all the folks on your team are going in the same direction using AI?
So that's a hard one, I think. I think I've made peace with the fact that there are going to be early adopters. There are going to be a few people in the middle that like will use it like most of the time, and there probably going to be some people who are still resistant. And I made peace with that fact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like ultimately, like I feel like what I want to hold my engineers accountable to is essentially getting things done. And like if you want to use AI, great. If you don't want to use it, great. At some point of time, I'm hoping that like the people who are resistant will see that it's going making them way more productive. So I mean, like the
Right.
data that I'm seeing is probably 20 to 25% of my organization are are, I'd say, power users. They tend to kind of run out of credits like quickly, like within the middle of the month. I'd say about 70% of my organization use it, but I wouldn't say they're power users. And then like there's about 10%, I don't know if I did the math right, but about 10% of the organization that don't. To me, it's almost like every task that I'm doing, I'm thinking about, can AI help me do this better? Like literally like everything that I do, right? And so like I'm encouraging my engineers to use that mindset as well, right? Which is, hey, you're doing something, like when you finish that task, like retrospect a little bit about like how could AI have helped you speed this up, and then
Mm-hmm.
what do you do in so that you can build an infrastructure so the next engineer working in this piece of code base can actually work faster, right? And typically that can be by like writing a bunch of rules that the LLM can then read and then reason about and go from there.
Interesting. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And the you know the early, middle, and late adopters thing, that's um, unless you're unless there's a tool that you're mandating, like all. What do you guys use for tracking your your tasks and stories and all that stuff?
So we use, I mean, mostly we use Jira. I'm not a big process guy
Okay.
myself, honestly. So I guess like my advice to my teams has been, if you want to use Scrum, use Scrum. If you want to use Kanban, use Kanban. If you don't want to use a process, don't use a process. At the end of the day, like I actually like dates. I like to work backwards from dates, right? So to me, I will basically ask teams to give me dates for when things will get done, which is not to say that like
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that date slip. I understand that software estimation is an art, and like when you're giving me an estimate, it's generally a range, and as you get closer to the range just kind of comes closer to each other.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so I'm inspired by how kind of Meta does this a little bit, right? Like, which is, if you really look at Meta, how Meta operates, they don't do Scrum. They don't even do stand up, right? Like everything, a bunch of that stuff is online, is offline. And when they need to meet and discuss something ad hoc, they do it. So that's been my advice, right? Like some of my teams are more process heavy. Some of them tend to run light on process. And so like I encourage them to find their own way. Some places it makes sense to standardize, which is like quality processes, incident response mechanisms, operational excellence processes, things like that. But like how they deliver stuff, like I let them make their decisions.
Ah, that's so interesting. Okay. Yeah. Huh. Okay, so that's interesting because I've never been at a company where the CTO was that trusting. Like they wanted some kind of a dashboard, and so we used your some one of the other tools. Um, Pretty much always ran daily stand-ups. I'm trying to think, like I'm going back in time. Yeah, I like
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I still think most of my teams do daily stand up. Some of them have decided to do it only 3 times a week. We do things like no meeting Wednesday, things like that. But like
mm-hmm,
basically, again, like my advice to them has been, hey, like I have my own mechanism with you folks. Like we meet weekly and we check in on projects. And basically, like that to me is, it's really, really important that you bring up risk to me. So if there's anything that's going on
mm-hmm.
wrong with the process, like bring it up to me, bring it up early. So, I mean, that's kind of my job to figure out how I can help you maybe mitigate this risk and how I can help you think through it.
Sure.
But like, that's kind of my interface into my teams, right? Which is, show me progress, don't show me process.
Oh, I like that. Okay, that might need to be the name of the episode. I like that. Okay, where's my Oh, that doesn't do it the way I want it to do. Jot down the show me. Okay, I got a note made. Thank you. This has been super interesting, and it totally hit the the goal of different kinds of stories. Because I
Amazing.
think, well, because I think I don't know that I've interviewed anybody that has as much time at Amazon, for example. And so, it's a deeper perspective, right? And understanding of how that particular big company operates. And then, now you're in how many people at the current company?
It's been about 120% company. I have seven teams, I think. Engineering is probably, product and engineering is probably like 70% of the company. It's a fairly small.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, small and relative,
Yeah.
it's all relative, right? Yeah. Yeah. But that's, it's very different when you're
Yeah.
there versus, Amazon or even, Yahoo probably was much bigger back, when you were there also, right?
It
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. So that's super cool. I really appreciate all the insights and all the wisdom. That's super helpful.
Absolutely. It was
Yeah.
fun.
And
Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
yeah, good.